I'm Eddie Cannell.
And I'm Tom Cannell.
We're the Mortgage Brothers team, everyone, and this is our 16th podcast. Woo!
Whoa, 16.
That's right.
We're still going?
That's right. And I hope we have our listeners out there. And you know what, Tom? What are we going to talk about today for them?
All right. Today, I hope everyone's sitting down. We're talking about LSUs, loan status updates. They're like love notes to the sellers.
That's right. We're LSUs. This is not football. It's not college football, everyone. This is loan status updates.
Loan status updates. And be thinking, like, what does that matter? You're just updating the loan status. Yes, the only reason why we're really covering this is because they're just so important to the sellers. Because the sellers are like, they're locked in a little prison cell in terms of not knowing exactly what you could have afforded for the house, what you would have paid for it, how qualified you are. They know you got a pre-qual, but they're really just kind of, waiting for their home to sell so they can move on with life. And this is their little love note that says, okay, this is how the borrowers are doing. This is how the loan is progressing.
That's right. This is something the Arizona Real Estate Association, the Association of Realtors in Arizona have put together. Just like they have the contract, they have the pre-qualification form that we actually have addressed on another podcast. I think it's podcast 15, and then this loan status update, the LSU. These are all These are all referenced and in the contract, and so the LSU. I mean, Tom, you just tell me if I'm going to like right from the top. It's a 2-page form, and on page 1. It's going to have a lot of the same information, 90% of the information that was on the pre-qualification form that we give to a buyer that they
it actually looks exactly like the pre-qualification form. And if you're not used to it, you will think it is the pre-qual. So I think the only thing noteworthy there is it's 90% the pre-qual. The other 10% is just added information, names of, the buyer. I believe the seller's on there too, right?
The seller.
Buyer, seller, property address, whether or not the interest rate's locked. So just some very, very basic things. But page 1, you'll literally
escrow is on there. So loan amount, right, and all, whether or not the documentation, the income, the assets, like the pay stubs, W-2s have been received, and so.
Right. And if you're not familiar with the contract, it requires that the buyer provide this to the seller. Technically, it only requires the buyer to send out one, and it's usually within 10 days of contract acceptance.
That's right.
So if someone's nervous, where's my LSU? Don't worry. Typically the LSUs are given, far in advance of 10 days, but the contract contemplates, a 10-day period.
Yeah. Our team, we like to send out these LSUs, 2 to 3 days after the contract acceptance. So we'll be way ahead of that requirement. But at the very bottom of page 1 is the buyer's signatures, or at least these line items for the buyers to sign. And this is the acknowledgement. You're acknowledging that you've received this. So what will happen is we'll be sending you an LSU. In fact, as if you're a buyer, this is probably the first time you'll even hear about LSU, is when you get a DocuSign email from your lender, like us, that says, hey, sign this loan status update because we're going to forward it on to the seller. And you're going to sign that, acknowledge the loan status form, and we forward that off to the listing agent, seller, and we'll share that with the buyer's agent, or buyer's agent too. So
perfect. Okay, let's jump into the LSU. I think you're going to cover the first couple of things, right?
Yeah. So starting with page 1 is there's line 41 all the way down to line 7.
And it's actually page 2.
Yeah. Page 2 of the LSU starts with line 41. So that I'm going to cover that right now.
Just so our borrowers know, it literally looks like a grocery store, grocery list. It's literally, 30 items, and it has a little box that says yes or no, and it just check mark like mayonnaise, mustard, peanut butter, jelly. So it's very, very, very simple.
And we're going to try to put this on YouTube, the form, and we're going to do our best just to kind of show some visuals on the YouTube version. So if anyone's not listening on YouTube or, through the YouTube, you can check that out.
And if anyone really wants to know the full process of how a loan gets approved, look at the LSU. It literally, that's that grocery list. It just goes through, boom, 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 boom. As we complete things, they're
Right.
checked. So, okay, sorry, go ahead.
So line 41 is, has the lender received the contract and addendums? So that's important because that's where we get all the information from, and that really starts the process anyway. So
Okay.
that's line 41.
Awesome. Speaking of process, it really can't start until the lender sends out the loan estimate. The loan estimates are required by regulation to be sent out within 3 days of the application. So that's a big thing. If you don't see the loan estimate being sent out, red flag should go up. This borrower is not, likely working with a lender even. And then also the intent to proceed. The borrower not only has to acknowledge the loan estimate, but they have to sign the intent to proceed. That literally means they intend to proceed with everything, which also will allow us to get going on the appraisal when the buyer is ready. We cannot order appraisals without that intent to proceed is signed.
Okay. Next line I'm going to talk about is line 48, and it's whether or not the payment for the appraisal has been received by the lender. So that would be, for us, a credit card authorization form that we have filled out. Okay. And then we send that to the buyer. They fill it out. And that would be marked yes or no. And that's good to know, if it has been received, because the next line, 49, is, has the appraisal been ordered? Okay. So a lot of times we receive the payment first. We hold on to it. We don't order the appraisal until we get the instructions from the buyer and the buyer agent that they are okay. We usually wait, Tom, right, until the buyer inspection is complete, or at least the negotiations are complete or very close to being complete. Now we will. Yeah.
And why is that? Why would a buyer not want the seller to know that?
It's the leverage that if the buyer spends, $500 on an appraisal, the seller knows they have some skin in the game, and they have something to lose.
They're committed. Yeah. Okay. Good. So that's a big one. All right. So you talked about the ordering the appraisal. Next one. I think you got one.
Oh, yeah. So I was also going to address that line 52, whether or not the buyer has locked in the interest rate, figured out the loan program and financing terms. If that box is marked no, I think that's also a warning sign. Like, has this buyer even committed to doing the loan with this lender? So I think it's important that they do have the interest rate locked, that they do have the program figured out. And so that's
good.
that.
That's it. Okay. Next one, line 54. Lenders receive the initial documentation. This is the documentation that is typically received during the pre-qualification form process. I would say that lenders typically get about 90% of the documentation that they need. They really, don't want to oblige the borrower to give them absolutely every little scrape of documentation needed to get pre-qualified. They typically, have a finger to the wind, so to speak, get about 90% of documentation, enough to make them feel that this borrower truly is qualified. And every time we issue a pre-qualification form, we always do our due diligence, including working with underwriters to make sure our borrowers are very sound. But if there is ever a piece that's left out, this is the point in time where that document would be needed. So maybe you've got, 4 W-2s from the borrower and they've given you 4, or they've given you 3. So you need an extra one. They got a small little part-time job that you knew they made a couple $1,000 off of. It's at this point in time that all the W-2s, all the pay stubs, all the tax returns, all the asset documentation should be received. So look for that.
Okay. I'm going to go to line 55, which is, has the appraisal been received? It's pretty simple, yes or no. Then it's line 56. Did the appraisal come back, at least for the purchase price? That's a yes or no question. Of course, all these are yes or no, but if it did come in at or above the purchase price, that will maybe marked yes. That's good to know. If it's marked no, then seller and buyer will probably have some negotiation to do. Okay. And then line 57 is right after that. I think it's important, is, has the closing disclosure been provided to the buyer? So the closing disclosure is just like the loan estimate in the beginning of the process. The closing disclosure is that document refined with more accurate numbers. In fact, it's the numbers we really like to get that closing disclosure as accurate as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think we do a great job of doing that. But that closing disclosure is sent to the buyer, then it's acknowledged. It has to be acknowledged because there's a waiting period. Once it's acknowledged, and usually it's through e-signatures, once it's acknowledged, there's a 3-day waiting period before the buyer can actually sign the loan documents at the title company. So what we like to do is we like to have that closing disclosure acknowledged a whole week before close at least.
Absolutely.
So we can have them signed about 3 days before the close of escrow.
Okay. All right. So huge one. Closing disclosures 3 days prior to close of escrow minimum. Okay. Line 59 and 60. So basically, these are basic. This is kind of a little bit going back in time, but this is under the underwriting and approval section that the lenders actually submitted the loan package to underwriting, which is really what we do. We prepare loan packages and get them submitted and get borrowers approved. So that's obviously a very, very big one. A little bit generic, if I were to say, but nonetheless a very big one that we've submitted the loan package. Secondly, we're going to receive 2 approvals during this process, and this is the first one. This is what we call the approval with prior to docs. So typically the underwriter will look through a package. They'll say, listen, we've got 98% of what we need to approve this borrower. We're going to approve them subject to you providing A, B, and C. So at that point, we would check that we got, lender approval with prior to docs. We've got a couple documents to get. Right.
And then line 61 is, have all the appraisal conditions been met? And people may be thinking, wait a minute, it doesn't that, why is there a separate appraisal condition question on the LSU? Because the reason why there is appraisals can come in at value, or at or above value, no problem, but they may be subject to repairs. And so this is where we want to see, there's 2 different statuses, right, of an appraisal. It's subject to repairs or it's as is, and appraisers will mark that. So we want it as is. If it's subject to repairs, the appraiser has to go back out there doing a final inspection. And then once that final inspection is done, then all appraisal conditions are cleared. And so that's when line 61 is checked.
Awesome.
And then line 62 is what you just mentioned, the initial approval from the underwriter. This is the question, have we received loan approval without prior to doc conditions? So this is what we call the clear to close, the final approval.
Ding, 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 ding. This is what we're all waiting for. Have you gotten your CTC, your clear to close?
That's right. So this is a big, once the clear to close comes in, the loans, now it's just a matter of getting the loan documents out, getting the thing signed, wire going out.
Okay, so speaking of loan documents, that's the last part we're going to cover on the LSU, because anything after the loan documents actually being sent out and signed typically is not addressed on an LSU because we are so close to the finish line. So the last 2 things are the lender actually getting the documents over to title scheduling the signing, and then the borrower's doing what we call a wet sign, which is actually literally doing their John Hancock on those documents.
Yep. And that summarizes the LSU.
The LSU, and we're not talking football, folks.
That's right. Tom, I think we covered it.
I think we covered it. Let's call it a day.
All right, everyone have a good week. Time to go home.
All right, we'll see you, folks.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Mortgage Brothers Show. Please let us know if you have any questions you'd like us to answer on this podcast. You can email your questions to tom@azmortgagebrothers.com or yours truly at eddie@azmortgagebrothers.com. And be sure to ask us for a free quote on your next mortgage. Tom and I will personally work with you and help you through the whole process. Signature Home Loans, LLC does not provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. This material has been prepared for informational purposes only. You should consult your own tax, legal, and accounting advisors before engaging in any transaction. Signature Home Loans, NMLS 1007154, NMLS number 210917, and 1618695, Equal Housing Lender.